Imagine a man ruling over the largest and most powerful empire of his time, between military campaigns and state affairs, writes intimate reflections each evening on virtue, patience, and wisdom. Picture a Roman emperor donning armor and a toga, who in the silence of his tent picks up a pen to jot down advice to himself, a sort of spiritual journal meant to forge his character rather than bolster his glory. This man is Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. In today's video, I invite you to delve into the life of this paradoxical figure, who was alternately a head of state, a general, and a Stoic thinker. You will discover how a cherished child, destined for the heights of power, became one of the leading figures of ancient philosophy, while facing one of the most tumultuous periods in Roman history. If you think wisdom does not marry well with politics, the example of Marcus Aurelius might just change your mind. We are in the 2nd century AD. Rome, under the Antonine dynasty, is at the peak of its power. Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, enlightened emperors succeed one another, consolidating borders, developing administration, and encouraging economic prosperity. This period is often described as a golden age of the Roman Empire. Yet, behind the apparent splendor, tensions simmer at the borders. Germanic peoples stir, the East experiences upheavals, and the precarious balance maintaining peace within the empire rests on the solidity of imperial power. It is in this context that Marcus Annius Verus, the future Marcus Aurelius, is born on April 26, 121 AD in Rome. His family, the Anni-Veri, hails from the Spanish aristocracy, already firmly established within the senatorial elite. His grandfather and great-grandfather had been consuls, and young Marcus grows up in an environment where cultural refinement meets the cultivation of traditional Roman virtues. His father, also named Marcus Annius Verus, dies when the child is only 3 years old, leaving his mother, Domitia Lucilla, a widow. Marcus is thus primarily raised by his maternal grandfather. Early on, he shows a deep sensitivity, a serious and thoughtful character. According to sources, he is particularly attached to the values of discipline and modesty, qualities later associated with his Stoic fiber. But Marcus's destiny takes a turn when Emperor Hadrian, who has no direct descendants, sets his sights on him. Hadrian had already arranged for Antoninus Pius to adopt another young man, Lucius Verus, and Marcus finds himself in a very select circle where it is clear he will be one of the potential heirs to the throne. Marcus is not yet 10 years old, and already there is talk of his potential to eventually succeed the emperor. Marcus Aurelius receives a meticulous education, entrusted to renowned masters in rhetoric, Latin, Greek, and philosophy. Among his teachers, Junius Rusticus, a Stoic, leaves a profound mark on him. Marcus immerses himself in the study of authors like Epictetus and Seneca, discovering Stoic ethics based on self-control, virtue, and acceptance of fate. In 138, Emperor Hadrian officially adopts Antoninus Pius, imposing the condition that he, in turn, adopt Lucius Verus and Marcus. From then on, Marcus Annius Verus is renamed Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, marking his definitive entry into the imperial dynasty. Hadrian dies shortly after, and Antoninus Pius becomes emperor. Marcus Aurelius, barely 17 years old, already knows that his future is set. He will succeed Antoninus with Lucius Verus as co-emperor. This phase of his life is marked by intense political and administrative training under the tutelage of Antoninus Pius. Marcus Aurelius learns the workings of the Roman state while pursuing his own philosophical path. When Antoninus Pius ascends to the throne, he governs with a firm yet calm hand. Marcus Aurelius, at his side, holds honorary positions: quaestor, consul, then military tribune. He gradually becomes the emperor's privileged assistant, sitting on the imperial council, studying political and administrative issues, and participating in decisions on taxation, justice, or provincial management, all in relative tranquility. The reign of Antoninus Pius is one of the most stable in Roman history. In 161, Antoninus Pius dies. Faithful to Hadrian's wishes, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus become emperors together. This is an unprecedented situation in Roman history. Two Augusti governing simultaneously. In practice, Marcus Aurelius is the true leader, with Lucius Verus playing a less prominent role. The two men do not confront each other openly. Lucius Verus is more inclined towards pleasures, festivities, and military campaigns pursued with a certain taste for glory. Marcus Aurelius, more studious and austere, manages the administration and complex dossiers. Yet, there is no open conflict. They manage the empire's affairs together, maintaining a good relationship until the untimely death of Lucius Verus in 169. One of the first major challenges they face as co-emperors is the war against the Parthians in the east. The Parthians, taking advantage of the imperial transition, invade the province of Syria. Lucius Verus heads to the front lines, while Marcus Aurelius remains in Rome to oversee logistics and supply. The military campaign ends in success, with the Roman army repelling the Parthians, but it brings back a terrible plague, the Antonine Plague, that devastates the empire for years, causing thousands of deaths and weakening state resources. Barely has the Parthian threat been dealt with when Marcus Aurelius finds himself confronted with another major crisis: the Germanic invasions. The Marcomanni and Quadi tribes cross the Danube, threatening northern Italy. With Lucius Verus dead in 169, Marcus Aurelius becomes the sole ruler, orchestrating the defense of the empire while the plague continues to rage. The Roman army struggles to find fresh troops, and Marcus Aurelius must raise new taxes, recruit freed slaves to bolster the legions, and multiply diplomatic efforts to contain threats on multiple fronts. It is during these military campaigns, between battles along the banks of the Danube, that Marcus Aurelius writes his Meditations. Originally, this is not a work intended for publication but rather a personal journal, where the emperor notes his Stoic reflections, moral exhortations, and inquiries into the nature of good, virtue, and fate. This practice strongly resembles the habits of Epictetus, who advised his disciples to review their actions each evening to correct themselves and cultivate virtue. Marcus Aurelius applies these precepts diligently. Between political decisions and far from the intrigues of Rome, he finds in writing a philosophical refuge to remain true to his principles. His thoughts are marked by a simple and direct style, tinged with melancholy and sometimes even weariness, but always directed towards the idea that one must fulfill their role in the world with rectitude and dignity. The Antonine Plague, likely smallpox, spreads throughout the empire between 165 and 180, sowing death in legions, cities, and countryside. Marcus Aurelius faces an unprecedented demographic and economic crisis. Sources estimate that 1 in 10 inhabitants may have perished from the epidemic, perhaps more. This catastrophe reinforces the acute awareness of the vanity of human glory and the necessity of turning towards the essential, virtue and the service of the common good. Despite everything, the emperor does not succumb to resignation. He takes concrete measures to support affected families, organizes the care of orphans, attempts to preserve agricultural yields, and supports economic recovery. He also issues edicts to moralize public life, emphasizing temperance, respect for the gods, and compassion for the victims of the plague. In Marcus Aurelius's eyes, Stoic philosophy is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is a practical guide for living in accordance with nature and reason. The emperor sees himself as an actor in a play whose script he does not control, but in which it is his duty to play his role with integrity. His writings overflow with edifying maxims. You have the power not to judge, and thus you will not suffer. Or, do not let the future trouble you. You will manage it with the same reason you employ today. This reason, and human will to face trials, also reflect in his governing style. Despite wars, natural disasters, and epidemics, Marcus Aurelius strives to preserve justice and equity. He reforms inheritance laws, abolishes certain unjust laws, encourages the liberation of slaves, and ensures the proper administration of provinces. He attempts to reconcile his quest for wisdom with the realpolitik imposed by the imperial throne. In the 1600s, barbarian offensives become increasingly pressing. Marcus Aurelius spends nearly 10 years on the front lines, wearing armor more often than a toga. The Marcomannic campaigns are harsh. Winter and disease decimate the ranks. Yet the Roman legions, under the emperor's command, achieve several decisive victories that push the Germans beyond the Danube. Despite these successes, the war seems endless, and the internal situation of the empire remains fragile. In 1755, a rebellion erupts in the east. Avidius Cassius, one of Rome's most brilliant generals, proclaims himself emperor, believing Marcus Aurelius to be gravely ill. However, Cassius is assassinated by his own officers before the legitimate emperor can arrive on the scene. Nevertheless, Marcus Aurelius travels to Asia Minor to restore order and ensure the loyalty of the eastern provinces. Upon returning to Rome, he associates his son Commodus with power. This choice marks the end of the dynasty of the five good emperors, which since Nerva had the habit of adopting virtuous successors rather than passing the throne to natural heirs. Commodus, although trained by his father, does not share the same moral rigor. According to ancient historians, his reign will quickly be marred by corruption and authoritarianism. Some authors, including Cassius Dio, question why Marcus Aurelius, a man of such wisdom, could leave the empire to a son so ill-prepared and so different from himself. Was it the pressure of dynastic tradition, the accumulated fatigue from years of rule and war, or did he genuinely believe that Commodus would prove worthy of power? The Meditations do not directly address this question. Rather, they suggest the notion of Stoic acceptance. The emperor plays his role and then steps back when nature decides. In 180, during a new campaign against the Germans, Marcus Aurelius falls ill. Legend has it that it is once again the Antonine Plague that ultimately claims him. He dies in Vindobona, modern-day Vienna, or Sirmium in Pannonia, according to various sources, on March 17, 180. His last thoughts, according to historian Herodian, were exhortations to Commodus to strive to be a good emperor and to protect the empire. The news of Marcus Aurelius's death evokes profound sorrow in Rome. Senators, the army, and the populace regard him as the embodiment of the ideal philosopher-emperor, just and compassionate. This marks the end of a golden age. Commodus, on the other hand, will reign in a much more violent and capricious manner, plunging Rome into an era of instability. Published posthumously, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations constitute a unique testimony, a mirror held up to the human condition. It is not a speculative work nor a philosophical treatise. Rather, it is a collection of private notes, Stoic meditations where the emperor addresses himself, seeking inner strength to confront his responsibilities. Unlike other Stoic works such as Epictetus's Discourses or Seneca's writings, the Meditations do not target a broad audience. They reflect a raw sincerity. Marcus Aurelius reproaches himself, reminding that anger, envy, and fear are futile. He reiterates that everything passes, that glory is ephemeral, and that only the effort to maintain a righteous soul truly matters. This authenticity likely explains the enduring success of the book through the centuries. One reads the voice of a powerful man who nonetheless recognizes his own fallibility, mortality, and subjection to fate. After his death, Marcus Aurelius is deified by the Senate, as is customary for emperors. Posterity retains the image of a wise and benevolent monarch. During the Renaissance, the emergence of humanism brings Marcus Aurelius back to the forefront, inspiring thinkers who seek a moral path grounded in ancient ethics. Machiavelli cites Marcus Aurelius as a model of the virtuous prince. In the 17th and 18th century Europe, his meditations circulate among the literate, nourishing the reflections of Enlightenment philosophers like Voltaire, Diderot, and Montesquieu, who admire Marcus Aurelius's ability to reconcile absolute power with the quest for wisdom. Closer to our time, existentialism and pragmatic philosophy, continue to view Marcus Aurelius as a master of introspection. In every crisis, every troubled era, revisiting Marcus Aurelius appears as a refuge. His exhortations to refocus on the essential, to distinguish what depends on us from what does not, continue to illuminate minds. Marcus Aurelius also bequeaths us a fascinating reflection on politics. Can one govern while being stoic? His reign suggests that yes, even if the price to pay is steep. The emperor bears the immense responsibilities of managing the empire while adhering to the Stoic ethics of modesty. He embodies the notion of a rector imperii, a philosopher-leader. However, history shows that this model of a wise emperor is fragile. It took only Commodus's deviation from virtue for the entire edifice to tremble. Marcus Aurelius himself acknowledges this. He cannot save the empire from all its excesses nor eradicate suffering. Stoicism offers him rather an individual path of resilience, exemplarity, and the conviction that living according to reason and virtue, even at the head of an empire, is already a victory over the chaos of the world. The equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, which still stands today in the Piazza del Campidoglio in Rome, perfectly encapsulates the paradoxes of this man. He is depicted as an emperor clad in invisible armor, yet with a grave face and meditative features. He dominates the warhorse while offering a thoughtful gaze toward the horizon. It is the image of a sovereign aware of his role, a man bearing the weight of the world while remaining committed to inner wisdom. If one were to retain a single lesson from Marcus Aurelius's life, perhaps it would be this: one can be at the pinnacle of hierarchy and remain humble before the fragility of the human condition. One can impose laws on citizens while imposing even stricter ones on oneself, out of pure moral conviction. One can lead armies and yet seek peace within one's heart. Marcus Aurelius is the story of a child chosen by an emperor who became a philosopher despite himself, compelled to govern an empire in turmoil. It is the tale of a Stoic who, in his thoughts, addresses both himself and us, seeking the strength to endure what cannot be changed and the courage to change what can be, while also possessing the wisdom to distinguish between the two. From his life, we remember that he endeavored, in a world rife with violence and disease, to uphold the course of virtue. His writings, originally simple personal notes, continue to whisper to us through the ages that one can be the emperor of oneself before governing others. His work, revered by many philosophers and heads of state, illustrates the power of a Stoic ideal that remains unshaken. The only victory that truly matters is the one over our own passions and illusions. The wars, plagues, and betrayals are merely transient trials. Wisdom, however, endures. The life of a man is but a fleeting moment, its essence a perpetual flow, its sensations obscure, its body corruptible, its soul a whirlwind, its fate inscrutable, and its renown uncertain. In a word, all that belongs to the body is a river, and all that belongs to the soul is a dream and smoke. Life is a war and a journey made in a foreign land, and posthumous legacy is but oblivion. These words, penned nearly 2,000 years ago, have lost none of their potency. They resonate still as the testament of a man who, despite the imperial purple, reminded himself daily of his own mortality. Perhaps this is the key to his inner empire. At a time when our modern societies face global challenges, pandemics, political instability, and a quest for meaning, the voice of Marcus Aurelius sounds strangely familiar. The philosopher-emperor who confronted plague and invasions invites us to master our fears, examine our certainties, and discern the essential from the superfluous. He also reminds us of the necessity to be benevolent, even in a hostile world. His legacy is multifaceted. On one hand, he embodies a Stoic tradition that continues to inspire modern psychology, personal development practices, and daily meditation. On the other, he demonstrates that high political responsibility does not preclude, but rather enhances, a profound inner life. This may be his most relevant lesson. Even when invested with supreme power, one remains a mere mortal who must seek righteousness and coherence within oneself. Ultimately, Marcus Aurelius reminds us that greatness does not reside in titles, statues, or monuments, but in the quality of our thoughts and actions. As he himself writes, "Do not let your mind wander. Do not be torn by your passions. Do not complain about your fate. Do not be swept away by your desires or fears. Seek justice and truth in all things." This succinctly encapsulates the legacy of a wise emperor who remains through the centuries one of the timeless beacons of Western philosophy. If you wish to learn more about Stoic philosophy and the moral legacy of Marcus Aurelius, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video. It is thanks to your support that we can continue to produce content on history and philosophy.